Well, thank you all for having me out here today. My name is Peter, and I gotta say, these things are awesome. Man, if we had these back in my day, you know how many cold mornings I spent waist deep in water throwing nets trying to catch some fish? I grew up in Galilee. I grew up in a family of fishermen, and man, when I was around, we definitely did not have these. We didn't have these cool quick dry shirts or anything like that. But thank you for having me out today. And I came here to tell you a story. It's my story. It's the story of my best friend. And my hope is that by the end, it can become your story. So like I said, I grew up a fisherman long time ago in a world far away. I grew up on a sea called Galilee. I grew up fishing. That's what I did pretty much my whole life until one night, my brother went out and we went out fishing. We fished the entire night and caught nothing. Zilch. Threw out net after net after net and came back empty-handed. Sun rises, we're heading back into shore, and some chump comes walking along the shore and he shouts out, "Why don't you throw your nets on the other side?" We're like, "Oh, you have no idea how tired and frustrated we are." But just so he'll leave us and go away, we try and make him happy. We throw our nets on the other side, and lo and behold, we pull up our nets, and they are full to the point of bursting. And we realize, whoa, something's up with this guy. So we pull up our nets, we get into shore, and he introduces himself, and he says he's a rabbi, and he wants us to be his disciples. I thought, whoa, I'm just a fisherman. Why would you ask me? But I'm not going to turn that offer down. So I begin to follow him, and that begins the craziest 3 years of my life. And so I begin to follow him. We collect more disciples, and we begin going all around Israel. And this guy is crazy. He can do things that I didn't even think were possible. I watched him give a blind man sight. I watched him put an ear back on a guy's body. I'll get to that part later, right? I watched him heal the lame and the sick. Crazy. And it began to dawn on me, this is the guy. Like he's the one. I don't know about your history, but my people's history begins, we were brought out of Egypt by a mighty, powerful God, and he rescued us. Right? But we kind of messed it up. But our hope was that one day, he kept promising, day after day after day, right? He would send a king, a true king who would come and deliver us, right? Who would set Israel up on top of the world, right? And then God's reign and his rule would spread to the rest of creation. And I knew I had found the guy. Like he was the one. And he picked me, some random fisherman, to be in his crew. But he said things he wasn't supposed to say, and I kind of just ignored them. Right? Again and again throughout our journey, he would keep saying things like, "Well, I'm going to have to bear my cross." Oh, okay, it's just a metaphor. Or like, no, they're going to kill me. Like, no, they're not. You're the Messiah. You can't die. I don't know. Are you upset? Are you overworked right now? Whatever. Okay. They're going to kill you. We'll just let it go. And I didn't really pay attention. But he kept saying, no. The chief priests, the scribes, the Pharisees, they're going to kill me. I'm going to be raised up on a cross. And I thought, okay, there's some analogy, there's some metaphor behind it. I just shrugged it off. So it was about the third year that we'd been together, and there were 12 of us and him, and we had all become as good of friends as you can imagine. And so it was our third year. We were headed to Jerusalem, and it was Passover time. Passover is the festival where we celebrate the time when God rescued us out of Egypt. So the angel of death was coming. You'd slaughter a lamb, spread the blood on your doorpost, and the angel of death would pass over and not kill you. And that was sort of the final thing, the catalyst that got us out of Egypt, and then God flexed his muscles and brought us into the land. And so we were in Jerusalem, gathered to celebrate this. We had dinner. Jesus would say some weird things at dinner. He broke some bread, passed out some wine. And he said, this is my body broken, this is my bloodshed. I thought, okay, here's those metaphors, analogies again, whatever that means. He gave this rather long dialogue, and then we left dinner and we headed to a garden. It was a garden we'd been to plenty of times before, and I was pretty tired. But Jesus was upset, but I was just beat. And so I'd see him off there. I was trying to stay awake, but I fell asleep. And then he'd wake me up, and I'd fall asleep again. And then something got my attention, and I wasn't sleeping anymore. All of a sudden, I hear the clanking of swords against armor, and here comes one of our crew, Judas, with a bunch of armed guards. I thought, why would he be bringing a bunch of armed soldiers to us right now? But he was a friend, so he'd been with us 3 years. I figured he must have a good reason. He comes up, he greets Jesus, and Jesus says, "Who are you looking for?" And they say, "Jesus of Nazareth," and he says, "I am he." And I can't even begin to convey the tone that he held, but the effect that he said, of those words that he said, was the guards, professional soldiers, fell back and fell down afraid. I am he. They got up. He asked again, "Who are you looking for?" "Jesus of Nazareth, I am he." He says, "I am he. If it's me you want, then let my friends go." And I thought, all right, this is it. This is the time. The whole time he's been turning down king. Nope, not going to be king. Nope, not going to be that kind of king. But all right, this is it. I had a sword. I pulled my sword, and I'm like, let's do battle. And so I get one slash in. Not a very good swordsman. I get a guy's ear. Take his ear off. And Jesus says, "Put your sword away." And I thought, why? What do you mean? He says, "Am I not to drink the cup that my Father has poured for me?" And he just goes with them. Like Jesus just goes with them. He doesn't even put up a fight. I thought, what in the... And so it was then my adrenaline really started to begin to pump. It was then it really started to sink in. Is he really gonna die? No, all right, there's going to be some little last-minute thing that's going to come. So they take him, and I begin to follow at a distance. Okay, I begin to follow at a distance. Now, what I didn't mention is that earlier on, when we'd been walking, not that day, but weeks earlier, it had come to a conversation where Jesus, he would get in one of his moods where he'd say, "I'm going to die," right? "I'm going to die." And then I said, "Jesus, I'll follow you anywhere. Even if I have to die, I'll follow you." And he said these words that haunt me in my dreams. He said, "Before the rooster crows, you'll deny me 3 times. Now, I had forgotten all about this until the events that happened next. So they take him, they bring him to a man named Annas. He's the father-in-law of the high priest that year. And they take him and they begin to interrogate him there. I'm kind of following from a distance, kind of from the outskirts. And as I get there, as they take him in, as I'm about to enter, someone looks at me and they say, "Hey, aren't you one of his disciples?" I said, No. No, not me. No way. And I let it go. And there were some soldiers there who had a fire going. They were warming themselves around the fire. So I kind of crept in. I'm trying to get an ear what's going on, warm myself by the fire a little bit. And they begin to interrogate Jesus. And Jesus isn't giving them answers that they want to hear, so they begin to slap Jesus. And then as I'm sitting around the fire, one of the guards there says, "No, aren't you one of his disciples?" I say, "No." And then another one asked, who just happens to be the cousin of the guy whose ear I cut off, "No, I'm pretty sure I saw you there when we arrested him." And I said, No way, not me. And at that moment, 2 things happened. A rooster crowed, and Jesus locked eyes with me. And that saying, I'll follow you, even if it means my own death. No, you'll deny me 3 times before a rooster crows. And my heart was pretty crushed. The shame that welled up. Here's my best friend being interrogated and beaten, and I've just denied him 3 times. And so I was pretty crushed. But Jesus was still being crushed. And the interrogation continued. They had left Annas' house. They took him to Caiaphas, and then eventually he ended up before Pilate. And there were a few rounds of back and forth, and the Jewish leaders, my people, my elders, my leaders were screaming, crucify him, crucify him. And again, Pilate would say, I find no guilt. Why do you want me to kill him? Do you want me to release him? Right? And Pilate was trying to decide, is this the king of the Jews? Is this the king of the Jews? Who is this man, and why do they want him dead so badly? And they would go back and forth and back and forth. And eventually it reached a climax where my people, the people of the one true God, supposedly, they say this man has made himself out to be a king. We have no king but Caesar. Anyone who lets this man live is a friend of Caesar. And so Pilate has him killed. Throughout this back and forth exchange, Pilate had already had him flogged, which is about as brutal as you can imagine. Basically ripped the skin off of his back. And so he was pretty well trashed before the crucifixion happened. Pilate gives the order to have him crucified. They make him carry his own cross up to a place on a hill. We called it the Skull Hill. He is so shattered by this point that he can't even carry it himself. The Romans have to order someone from the crowd to carry it with him. And they get up to the skull. And the whole time I'm thinking, something's going to happen. Something is going to happen. This can't be the way it ends. This can't be how. I gave my life to this, and this is how it's. But nothing happened. There was no miracle at the last moment. They took him, they nailed him, and they hung him. And for 6 hours, he hung there. Now it came to the point it was getting pretty dark. The Jews, the leaders, they didn't want to defile the Sabbath. Isn't that ironic? And so they said to the Romans, you have to kill them more quickly so we can take them down before the Sabbath. And so the Roman soldiers, they broke the legs of the men on either side of Jesus. He was crucified with a couple other guys. When they got to Jesus, they realized he was already dead. Just to make sure, they grabbed a spear, rammed it up into his rib cage. Blood and water poured out. He was dead. There was no doubt. These were professional killers. I mean, he was dead. And Pilate had also had an inscription. He put a plaque on Jesus' cross. And it said, in a few languages, the King of the Jews. At the time, I just saw misery and pain. But looking back, I cannot think of a more profound picture or a more profound statement than the crucified King of the Jews. So Friday night came and went. Saturday came. Depressed doesn't even begin to describe how I was feeling. Crushed, demoralized, hopeless, ashamed. It just felt like just Totally worthless. Sunday morning came, and then something changed. Something happened. See, not me, but Mary she'd gone down to Jesus' tomb, place where they'd buried him. She went Sunday morning, and when she got there, she saw something that made her hysterical. She saw that the stone, right, it was just, imagine about a 3-foot stone disc that had covered up the doorway. It had been rolled to the side, which meant someone had stolen the body, somebody had robbed the tomb, something was going on. And so hysterically, she came and ran, and she found me and my friend John, and so then we both ran to see what was going on. John beat me there. I burst in through the doorway, and I see the linen wraps in which Jesus had been buried. There was no body in them, and the face wrap was neatly folded and laid to the side. I didn't know what to think, but all I knew was he was dead for sure. Somebody must have stolen his body. So I went home, because I'm not that bright. I went home, John went home with me, but Mary stayed. She stayed to weep and to mourn, and she peeked inside the tomb, and she saw something. She saw the linen laying there, and she saw 2 guys in there. Right? Look, 2 angels. They looked like humans, but they had this brilliant aura about them. And they said, "Woman, why are you crying?" She said, "Because they've taken my Lord, and I don't know where they've put him." And she turned around, and she saw another person standing there. And this one she thought must be the gardener or something, because the tomb was in a garden. And so she said, "Where have you laid my Lord? Tell me so that I can go find him." But it wasn't a gardener. That was Jesus. And she didn't see it at first. But eventually Jesus said, "Mary." And that struck her, that cued her, and she realized, "Teacher, Rabbi, it's, what? You're alive? How is this possible?" And she ran to hug him, and she, "Whoa, don't hang on to me yet. I haven't ascended. Go and tell my brothers that I'm alive." And so she does. She tells us. Isn't that fascinating? Right? I'm a man. I'm supposed to be in charge, and yet she is the one who actually figures out the news first. She gets to be the first missionary. And so she comes, and she finds us, and we hear the good news. But we couldn't find Jesus, right? But later that night, we were all huddled up in a room. Doors are locked, okay? Because we were scared if they killed the leader, maybe they're going to come after, right, his 12 most influential followers. So the doors are locked. We're scared. We've heard this news from Mary. We don't know what's going on. Doors locked, and then Jesus enters the room. And then he says, "Peace." Bro, you just phased through a wall. There is nothing peaceful about me right now, right? But he says, "Peace be with you." And we're just freaking out. I mean, we are going, how? We saw you die. How is this possible? What in the world is going on? And slowly it begins to dawn on us that it had to be this way. What we didn't understand about Friday night was that Jesus, like the Passover lamb long ago, was our Passover lamb. That death and the wages of sin were coming for us. But like the Passover in Egypt, Jesus sheds his blood, and Jesus sprinkles his blood, which we take by faith on us, and the angel of death passes over us as well. The angel of God's wrath, due us, passes over. And that on that cross, he was bearing our sin and our wrath in our place. And that 3 days later, he rises from the dead as a sign to all of us that we were right. This is the guy. God's kingdom has come. A new creation is here. So I said, this is partly my story. because while I was hearing all of this, I was still haunted by my actions Friday afternoon. I thought, yes, we were right. This is the guy, but I failed. And he doesn't want me back. So I did the only thing I know how to do. I returned home and I went fishing. He's right. The kingdom was here. He's the king. But he didn't want me. So I went fishing. And my brother and I, stayed out all night. We didn't catch any fish. We get back to shore in the morning. Some guy comes walking along the shore, some smart mouth, and he says, "Throw your nets over the other side." And I've heard that before. And we do. And our nets are bulging with fish, so much that we can barely get them in. And it clicks, and I realize it's him. It's Jesus. So I throw on all my clothes, I dive in the water, and I swim to shore, totally leaving my brother to get everything. I'll do all the work on his own. But I don't care. All I can think is that's Jesus on the shore. And I've been here before. What's going to happen? And so we get there. Jesus has a fire going. He says, "Bring me one of your fish." He fillets it. And he cooks me a meal. The God of the universe, this guy who I'm following, who I absolutely betrayed and turned over for my own, well, I didn't turn him over, but I certainly didn't stand up for him. I betrayed him. And he knew it, and we locked eyes. And this same guy is now cooking me a meal. If you can imagine how writhing my insides were at that point, how conflicted I felt. And then he says this, he says, "Peter, do you love me more than these? You love me more than these fish?" I said, "Yeah, you know that I do." "Well, feed my sheep." And then again he says, "Peter, do you love me more than these?" "Yeah, yes, you know that I do. Tend to my lambs." And then again he asks a third time, and it hurts. He says, "Peter, do you love me more than these?" "Yes." "And take care of my flock." And then it dawned on me. 3 times I had denied him before, and now 3 times he is giving me the opportunity. He is speaking directly to me 3 times, giving me the chance to take those back, to reaffirm my love for him, and then to tell me, "No, you're not abandoned. I'm not done with you. I'm not done with you, Peter. You go. You do the job that I called you to do." Forgiven. Free. That's my story. And my hope is that today you will make that your story. You see, no matter who you are, what you've done, whether you followed him in the past and left, doesn't matter. There's grace and there is mercy. If he can forgive me, his best friend who betrays him in his darkest moment, if he can forgive me and restore me and still give me a task and a mission, then is there anything that he can't forgive you of? No, he is all of our Lord. And he has given us missions for us to accomplish. And there is grace and there is mercy. And so follow him wherever you are this morning. His resurrection is here. New creation has begun. And it is spreading to the entire cosmos. So where you see brokenness, follow Jesus and seek to mend it. Where you see pain, follow Jesus and bring healing. Where there is division, follow Jesus to bring empathy and unity. There is no one in this room that he cannot use, that he will not use, that he isn't crazy about. He has called us all. So let us follow him through his death and into his resurrection. Would you pray with me? Jesus, thank you that you are the God who is so gracious and merciful, that you are the Lord, the true King, the crucified King, the true leader who lays down his life to defend his sheep from the threat against them. Jesus, convince us of this truth this morning. Drive it deep into our hearts and our souls and our minds and our spirits and our bones and our flesh. Let this be a living, breathing truth in us. Lead us to follow you, to carry our cross, and to find resurrection. We love you, and in your name we pray. Amen.